Hi, welcome back. It's Anna
and Rose.
coming to you from the Mystery Parlor.
Today's episode is about signs from beyond, meaning the dead, usually comforting in a chilling, keep you up in the middle of the night, wondering kind of way.
Even though we will be releasing this at a later date, we are beginning to write this episode on Ash Wednesday. It seems appropriate to be writing about the dead on the day priests around the world apply a cross of ashes to foreheads everywhere, saying, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return."
Communicating with the dead is nothing new. Even ancient Egyptians spoke with and wrote letters to their dead. These letters were taken along with offerings of food and drink to their burial sites. Sometimes the bowls containing these offerings had writing on them. These letters were often asking their deceased loved ones for help with illnesses or heartache, but it was also common to write simple letters asking how they were doing and if their new place was well.
Today, when a loved one passes away, many look for signs to help with grief. Often we feel someone's presence or even a touch, sometimes hear a voice. It's common to see those who have passed in a dream, or a meditative state, or even as an apparition while awake. These experiences are usually not scary, more so felt as a gift. I asked a religious leader about this, and they simply answered, it's either a gift from God, the devil, or an overly active imagination, which we'll interpret as an acknowledgement that anything is possible.
Oh, the cat just jumped on the table. When we see a symbol, it may make us think of a loved one or think that they are with us at that moment. Things like butterflies, rainbows, birds, or certain flowers. But it's not the symbol so much, it's when it decides to show up or the behavior of it.
For instance, if someone has recently passed away, then the TV begins to turn on or change channels on its own. Weird, but things happen. If the TV turns on and the channel changes to the deceased's favorite show, that's a little more convincing.
Most of us have heard the saying, when cardinals appear, angels are near. Here is a popular poem from one perspective. This poem is called Red Feather Soul by L.B. When you're lost or feeling down, don't despair, just look around. God made me red so you would see I still exist outside your memory. I make my visits in bright daylight. You'll hear my song in distant flight. My cardinal song is a call to you, to tell you that I miss you too. I am everywhere and finally free, like love you cannot touch or see. You'll see me in the trees and skies. I didn't leave, love never dies.
This is Rose's story about cardinals that she has asked me to read aloud for her. I don't exactly know how, but I believe that cardinals are sent to me and my family as signs from our loved ones who have passed away. My aunt, for example, was nicknamed Bird as a child. I don't even know the story behind the nickname, just that my grandfather referred to her as the Bird all the time. A day before her passing, the family had gathered at the house to visit with her and say their goodbyes. Someone got up during the dinner to let the dogs outside, and a bird flew into the house. Even though we sometimes leave the doors open in nice weather, we have never had a bird in the house. After a brief chase, the bird was shooed back outside. Immediately, and I don't know why, I remembered the significance of bird. My aunt passed away the next day. A couple of months later, my mother woke me up early in the morning to help her get another bird out of the house. This time, it was a bright red male cardinal. Of course, he was in the room with the highest ceilings and the largest windows. While he was hopping low to the ground and trying to fly through the glass, I was able to catch him in my hands. He immediately bit down on my finger, which hurt, by the way. I quickly ran outside and opened my hands. It took a few seconds for him to realize we were outside and release my finger. Now we have had 2 birds in the house within just a couple months. From then on, I see cardinals everywhere, and often when I'm thinking about my aunt. I probably have close to 100 stories. The sightings became so frequent that I started taking photos and taking down notes. You might be thinking I'm crazy. that there's no way that every time I see a cardinal, it's a sign from beyond, and I agree. I definitely think that some of them have been coincidences, maybe even more than half, but I also believe that some of them have been true signs from beyond.
We need to bring up mediums here and the difference between them and an average Joe getting a sign from their deceased friend, and the difference between mediums versus mystics. The simplest way to explain this is that mediums, which also applies to spiritualists, clairvoyants, fortune tellers, and necromancers, tend to reach out to the dead looking for connection. Mystics, on the other hand, are given messages without prompting. There are many figures throughout history that are considered mystics, and most of them are religious people. There are also people today who refer to themselves as mystics. Many of their messages mention the need to pray for the dead and give thanks to God.
Rose went to Teresa Caputo, the Long Island Medium live event. Here are the highlights.
In 2019, I dragged my mother to one of Teresa Caputo's live shows. I don't think she was very excited, but she ended up having a good time. I asked her to share her thoughts, and this is what she gave us.
Firstly, Teresa had some pretty fabulous clothes. Sparkly Louboutins with a black dress with crystals dripping down the shoulders. In all seriousness, I was kind of taken aback by the reading she gave some of the audience members. We were sitting on the aisle in the first few rows. Teresa stopped near us, even touched Rose on the shoulder twice. I definitely thought she was going to communicate with some of our family members who have passed, but she moved on to another person in the crowd.
My favorite part was when this one couple in the front row caught Teresa's attention. She was picking up on some men who were in a terrible accident and wanting to come through. She asked the couple who they were hoping to communicate with, and they told her about recently losing a child. She insisted that it was not the child who was reaching out, but several adult men who were showing her tragedy and fire. The wife nudged her husband and whispered something to him. He realized that she was communicating with his fellow soldiers that lost their lives several years prior. His team was attacked while on a mission, and he was the only survivor. The details she provided broke through his skepticism, and he broke down with emotion.
We had mentioned earlier that the episode was written on Ash Wednesday. It is now September. We tried reading through this about 2 weeks ago, but had to pause. Rose was too emotional talking about cardinals and the connection to her recent loss of loved ones. While we were trying to decide if we were going to push forward and record or put it off a little longer, my neighbor stopped over with a bottle of wine as a thank you for taking care of her pets while she had been away on vacation. Rose and I usually drink a glass, or, let's be real, a bottle of wine while recording. We set the bottle aside and decided to take a break.
Later, when we went to put the bottle of wine from the neighbor on the wine rack, we noticed the art on the label featured a cardinal. We saved it for today and feel like it was a sign from beyond.
Another frequent sign from the other side is fragrance. Some good and some not so good.
There have been sad stories where smells of sulfur and other grotesque things have been smelled when a deceased person is brought up in conversation or thought. It's even scarier when several people smell it at the same time. Enough about that for now.
I'd like to tell you about the first time I went to Rose's house after her beloved grandmother passed away. The entire house smelled of church incense. I feel the need to mention that Rose lives in the house her grandmother lived in for almost 50 years.
Anna and I both diffused essential oils, so she asked right away what I was diffusing, because she thought it smelled so good. Crazy, but I hadn't been diffusing anything. And the last time I had, it was a regular recipe Anna had smelled a number of times before.
We have something else to tell you that happened recently after Rose's grandmother's passing. Her grandma was an awesome chef. One of her specialties was pea soup. I'll have Rose take over from here.
We were going through photos of Grandma for her celebration of life boards. One photo we found was of Pea Soup Anderson's restaurant in California, famous for their pea soup. No one was up for cooking, so we all headed to our go-to Italian restaurant down the street. We have been going to this restaurant pretty regularly for over a decade. As we were looking at the daily specials, to our surprise, for the first time ever, The soup of the day was pea soup. It was as if Grandma was right there sending us a sign at the place we had had so many family dinners. We were obligated to order a cup, and it was good, but not as good as Grandma's.
Our next story is about high school sweethearts. Actually, they met in junior high. We will call them Ned and Amy. They were married in the early 70s, had 4 children, and were living happily ever after.
Unfortunately, Amy became ill and was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and quickly passed away at the age of 52.
A few years later, Ned found love again with a sweet lady we're going to call Trisha. Ned's adult children all missed their mother dearly, but they were happy to see that their dad wasn't alone.
Ned and Trisha decided to get married, and all of their adult children were happy for them. They planned a courthouse wedding with just the 2 of them in Florida, a nice little getaway in the sun built in as a honeymoon.
They flew into Tampa, rented a car, spent the night in a beachside resort, and headed to the courthouse the next morning. On the drive into town, Ned was caught off guard by the sudden smell of Taboo perfume.
We wanted to know what it smelled like, so we looked it up. Taboo came out in 1932 as the first fragrance by Dana. It's described as rich amber floral scent with jasmine and rose and fresh zingy notes of lemon and orange. Taboo and Ambush were very popular in the 1970s.
Guess who wore Taboo for their entire life? If you said Ned's first wife, Amy, you would be correct. Ned didn't say anything, he just kept driving. But Trisha finally said, "Strangest thing, I smell this perfume from forever ago. I think it's called Taboo."
Ned was shocked she noticed it too and shared with Trish that Taboo had been Amy's signature scent. The fragrance dissipated, and Ned and Trish took it as a sign of Amy's approval on their wedding plans. They were married that day and are currently living happily ever after.
Next up is a story about Janet, a little 5-year-old kindergartner.
I love children's stories, especially because they tell it like they see it.
Little Janet's grandmother had just passed away, and her family decided to move in with her grandfather to help him out. Janet's grandmother was only 56 years old when she died. She was on the front porch sweeping and suddenly collapsed from what turned out to be a fatal aneurysm.
Janet's great-aunt Eleanor lived 2 doors down. One day, Janet was coming home from kindergarten, and her mother and great-aunt Eleanor were sitting on the front porch waiting for her.
The same porch her grandmother passed away on a few weeks earlier?
Yes, but on this day, Janet happily skipped right past both houses. Both Aunt Eleanor and her mother called out to Janet, but she kept going. Her mother got up and ran after her. When she caught up to Janet, she asked where she was going. Janet replied that her grandmother was at the trolley or streetcar stop at the corner, motioning for her to come to her.
The grandma that just passed away?
Yep. Janet, now an adult, doesn't remember this happening, but has been told the story many times by her mother and Aunt Eleanor.
Now we are going to tell you about a brave little girl named Shelby. Shelby's mom had her as a teenager. Shelby's dad was not in the picture then or now. Thankfully, the 2 of them had all the support and love they needed from her mom's side of the family.
The girls moved out of Shelby's grandparents' house when she was 3 years old. Often at night, Shelby would come into her mom's room with her Woodstock stuffed animal. Just in case you aren't aware, Woodstock is the yellow canary and Snoopy's best friend in the Peanuts cartoon. This stuffed animal was also her mom's favorite when she was young, so it was very significant to both of them.
When Shelby was 7 years old, her mother came down with an illness. At first, she thought it was just a cold or the flu. Her symptoms were getting worse over the course of a few days, so she took herself to an urgent care facility. She was sent home with some meds and hoped to start feeling better quickly.
A few days later, she was only getting worse. Shelby's grandparents took her mom to the ER, and she was life-flighted to the closest big-name medical university hospital. Sadly, she was informed she had a rare aggressive cancer along with kidney failure due to undiagnosed lupus. She did not make it out of the hospital. She was put into a medically induced coma and passed away within hours.
This story came from Shelby's mom's cousin, Katie. Shelby's mom and Katie were the same age, grew up on the same street, and were very close. Katie was there when Shelby was born, and they were all a big part of each other's lives.
Shelby's mom's death was a huge shock to the entire family. Katie was working as a nurse at the time. She was married, had started a family, and lived on the same street as the rest of the family, including Shelby's grandparents. Shelby moved back in with her grandparents after her mother passed.
Shelby was at Katie's house when her mother was in the hospital and when they found out about her passing away. Before the grandparents even came to pick her up, strange things started to occur. The doorbell was chiming even when there was no one outside pushing the button. It became so annoying, Katie removed the batteries, and it rang again and again.
A few days later, Katie grabbed her keys to drive over to do Shelby's hair for her mother's funeral. Her brand new truck would not unlock with her key fob. Katie unlocked it with the physical key to have it relock immediately on its own. Out of desperation, Katie said, "Come on, I need to go do Shelby's hair for your funeral." Just then, the doors unlocked and Katie never had an issue with that fob again.
When Shelby's 8th birthday came around, Katie arranged a party for her and all her little friends at a bowling alley. They were all going to sleep over with Shelby at her grandparents' home.
The girls had a great time bowling and eating pizza. Afterwards, Katie was sitting with all the girls in Shelby's room talking about girl stuff when a helium balloon started moving. Not the usual drifty, bouncy, billowy way a balloon moves. The balloon was rigid and came down from the ceiling and was moving across the room toward the girls.
They all stared at the balloon in utter disbelief. Shelby stood up, and as they were all sitting in a circle on the floor, she said, "I think it's my mom." Then she said, "If that's you, Mommy, do something so that we know it's you." The balloon stopped and changed direction and went in a straight line for the bed and stopped up against the Woodstock stuffed animal laying on Shelby's bed. The girls all screamed and ran downstairs, including the only adult in the room, our friend Katie.
The grandparents were woken up with all the commotion. Shelby's grandma said she would go upstairs and see what was going on. The staircase had a few steps, then a landing, before turning sideways and going up the rest of the way to the second floor. It was an enclosed stairwell, so you could only see the first few steps until you got to the landing.
As she turned on the landing and started up the stairway, the balloon came down around the corner and started coming down the stairs right towards her. It was not on the ceiling or touching the walls. It was stiff and rigid, like someone was holding it and walking it down.
What the girls heard next was, "Stop that right now. You are scaring your daughter on her birthday. Enough."
And just like that, the balloon floated up to the ceiling and returned back upstairs, acting like a normal helium balloon from that moment on.
Katie is a friend of ours. She is raising 3 beautiful children of her own and has helped raise Shelby as well. Katie has been an ER nurse for many years and has seen many strange things at work, but it's that balloon incident that will give her goosebumps forever.
The next 2 stories involve children who have passed and the parents who love them dearly. These stories had us choked up while writing them.
Many cities and towns have Facebook pages and groups, places to ask questions, let others know what's going on, vent, and sometimes laugh at it all.
In a small town community group on Facebook, there was a sweet post that went like this. "Just wanted to share something that happened today. I don't believe in much, but I do believe in spirits. Today, me and my family were visiting a local cemetery. Rose and I, are leaving the name of the cemetery out for privacy." She went on to explain the section, row, and location of the grave she was about to reference. Then went on to say, "I was more trying to make sure I didn't step on people's loved ones, but my daughter giggled, and she doesn't giggle at nothing. It's a very warranted thing she does. I looked down and saw the grave of a 3-year-old little boy, and my heart dropped. She giggled again and said, 'Oh!' So we sat for a moment while she giggled and talked to this sweet little boy. For the life of me, I can't remember his name, and I didn't take a picture because it wasn't my gravestone. They had a picture of the sweet little boy, and we left a pink rose for him and said our goodbyes. I just wanted to share this in case his mama sees it. Your little boy had a play date today, and it went exceptionally well.
You might want to grab some tissues. Soon there was an update on the Facebook post. The little boy's family found the rose at the grave and reached out. The sweet little boy, who had just passed a few years ago, was about to be reunited with his mother, who was losing her battle with cancer. She passed away about 6 weeks after the original Facebook post.
I think we know who is waiting for her with open arms. I hope this Facebook post brought her family a little bit of peace.
Our next story gave us both goosebumps. This takes place in the suburbs on a typical school morning.
A little boy around 11 years old was running late for school. His mom rushed him out the door to drive him to the bus stop. The bus stop was on a corner. She quickly pulled up behind the bus as the line of kids were filing in. The little boy made a run for the bus, but as the last child in the line was entering the bus, the doors began to shut.
The bus driver did not see the mom's car parked behind the bus. The bus driver did not see the little boy running to get on the bus. The little boy tripped on his backpack strap and fell under the bus before reaching the door.
When he arrived at the hospital, it was too late to save him. At his funeral, the family released 2 white doves.
Some history on this little boy's mother. This little boy was not her only child. She was a classroom mom and playground helper for all of her children through the years. She was very involved in all of their lives.
A few weeks later, this grieving mother wanted to sit at the school playground. Her friend drove her there. She made her way to the swings and sat there silently. That is when a white dove appeared. You know, like the doves released at the funeral.
This dove sat within feet of her for almost an hour. She was able to sit on the ground, and it just stayed with her for the longest time. She felt it was the first sign from her little boy from the other side.
Oof. Those 2 were heavy. Luckily, this next one is a little lighter.
Well, it has a Disney angle. Lucy's grandmother recently passed away. On her way to work, just days after her passing, a specific song came on in the car. It was Colors of the Wind from the movie Pocahontas. She has a lot of music on her phone. She also listens to podcasts frequently instead. When she got to work, Lucy told her mother about hearing this song for the first time in many years. Her mother said, "Don't worry, that was just Grandma. You know she claimed to be Pocahontas in a past life, right?" Lucy did not remember this, but it made her smile.
Oh my goodness. Another way people get messages from beyond is during near-death experiences. There have been so many accounts of this, many books written, and even a recent documentary from 2023 called After Death. After Death is currently available to rent or buy from several places, including Prime and YouTube.
If you haven't watched After Death yet, we won't do a deep dive and ruin it for you.
What we will share is they cover near-death experiences, imagine that, stories from people of all different backgrounds. Those interviewed include a pilot, a doctor, a disgruntled teenager, a car accident victim, and surgical patients.
Spoiler alert, they didn't all see the happy, loving white light.
If you are looking for more information on near-death experiences, there is an International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS. It has been around for at least 40 years.
Here are a few fun facts about our White House and signs from beyond.
Non-political ones, of course. Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, visited mediums in Georgetown.
She also had seances in the White House Red Room. She felt comfort from these by communicating with her dead children.
Even earlier than Mary Todd Lincoln, Jane Pierce, who is married to President Franklin Pierce, also had seances in the White House for the same reason. She found comfort in communicating with her son, who died in a train accident. She communicated with him in her dreams and through seances. Still, she wore black and mourned his loss for the rest of her life.
President Abraham Lincoln is known to be an active ghost at the White House. His apparition has been seen or presence felt by a number of people, including these lucky ladies: Grace Coolidge, Roosevelt, Lady Bird Johnson, and Jackie Kennedy.
Nancy Reagan also was looking for signs from beyond while in the White House. Her method was astrology.
Nancy had always had an interest in horoscopes, but after the assassination attempt on President Reagan, she became more involved. Nancy had a well-known astrologer named Joan Quigley on a monthly retainer. Quigley had influence over good and bad days to travel and gave information about how Reagan would click with other people according to the stars.
Looking for signs from beyond wasn't just something that happened on this side of the Atlantic. Queen Victoria held seances in Buckingham Palace after the death of her husband in 1861.
Do you have any signs from beyond stories? If so, please share them with us for our next Listener Stories episode. You can contact us using the link in the description.
Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.